The best way to describe the buzz surrounding this movie that surrounded it for like a good long while now, at least for the whole year since the first trailer came out, is that it's kind of like the anti-Avengers type of reception. Like, everyone was really down on it. A lot of people were even openly boycotting it for whatever reason, like something like Michael B. Jordan's casting. Other people didn't like the tone, and it was really just a fucking mess. And it's only escalated more. There was Josh Trank making that tweet about how there was a fantastic version of the movie a year ago, and then Fox fucked it up. Then we found out that Josh Trank might have actually done some irresponsible behavior himself, but then we find out that Fox was screwing with him since the beginning of the shooting process, even after they gave him the okay to do whatever the hell he wanted to, and then there was the whole fan outcry, which no doubt in my mind also influenced Fox, deciding to do the whole reshoots thing, and everybody is kind of at fault here. Everybody's kind of fault is I don't think there's a single innocent person here. I think Trank probably did cave in to the whole pressure and the whole stress behind everything, and probably did some stuff he shouldn't have done. Fox was most definitely started fucking with him. And maybe not from the start of the production, but they were most certainly fucking with him. And the fucking him and this movie ever since the big fanboy outcry started out. And like my good friend Joey West says, don't listen to the fans, because it never fucking works out for you. Just look at Arrow Season 3, which was sucked, and Arkham Knight, which sucked. But all that bullshit aside, in a kind of environment like this, where this movie is getting so much negative attention, where it's getting blasted by the critics, where it's getting blasted by general audience and stuff, and it really just creates this kind of bizarre situation where you're almost afraid to go see the movie. But after seeing this movie, I really gotta say that I liked it. I really, really liked this one. Maybe it's because I'm an insane freak or whatever. But I actually feel like this might be my favorite comic book movie that's come out this year. I haven't seen Kingsman. I've heard Kingsman's amazing. But I would most definitely hold this above Ultron and above Ant-Man. Even though I still really like Ant-Man, I just think this is a very much better done movie. Now, I'm not going to stand here and say that the movie is amazing or it's perfect. Like, this is a really, really solid film. Like, if I was still using that bullshit numerical scale just to give you guys an idea of what I thought about it, I would give it like a 6.5, 7, maybe 7.5, depending on my mood. So it's kind of like in that age range where it's not the most amazing thing ever, but I really cannot, with a good conscience, sit here and tell you, like, this is the worst comic movie ever. It's worse than Ghost Rider 2. It's worse than X3. It's worse than fucking Batman and Robin. And I really don't understand what kind of fucking society I live in, where a movie like this, which is perfectly solid, is getting fucking blasted. I really like the whole message of the movie. And it's sort of ironic, and that's going to lead to the rant that I'm going to do later on in this video. And basically the whole gist of the thing is that our world is kind of fucked. It's not fucked like in a post-apocalyptic or near-apocalyptic way, but it's fucked in a real-life way where there's wars, there's depleting resources. It's a very cynical world where the government's doing things that are very, very morally wrong or very morally ambiguous. And it's a very cynical world. And in this world, we have optimistic youth. We have young people who are smart, who are innovative, who want to push the boundaries, who want to improve the world not for their own fame and glory, but who want to improve society as a whole. And that's kind of where Reed Richards comes in. Like, he states right off the bat that he's not here for the money or the glory. He's here to basically make a difference on society and a positive difference. And the whole gist of the film is that Reed Richards, even as a young kid, discovered this technology that allows people to teleport. And using this teleportation technology, which he eventually perfects to a level where he actually gets the attention of Frank Storm, who is, the leader of this whole initiative that's doing something very, very similar to him. And the whole idea is that they want to use Reed's teleportation technology to get to a new world or alternate dimension, basically like this primordial planet that's like the Earth from like 1 billion years ago, that can have limitless resources that can help save our world. And it's up to Reed Richards and these other kids other smart young kids to basically find a way to get to this planet and figure out what's there so that they can help improve society. And the big thematic through line of the film is, like I said, is how the young people are our future. Like Franklin Richards' generation, like the generation that grew up in the Cold War in like the 60s and the 70s, that kind of stuff. They're the guys who fuck things up. And he even says that my generation are the guys who fucked everything up. We've ruined a lot of things. We're the jaded, cynical bastards at the government who just use anything and everything for war, for destruction, and we don't really want to improve society. We just want to control everything and do that kind of stuff. And that's kind of the role of the government. And the young people, in his perspective, are the guys who are going to save us from that, because they're going to rectify the mistakes of the previous generations and create a bright, positive future for society as a whole. And this is where I think the movie actually works, where Man of Steel didn't. Man of Steel, even though I still like that movie, it's a thematic mess. Like, it's trying to be really about hope, but Superman's really cynical and not very optimistic himself, and then the things that happen in the movie go counteract the theme of trying to be hopeful and stuff, and so it really doesn't work. But in this movie, there is no point where the characters are just being cynical and jaded like everybody else. Like when they do get sad, it feels warranted because this awful change has happened to them, which is another interesting part of the movie, is that unlike basically most superhero movies where the hero gets his powers and then they become like a superhero, or they like struggle with it for a while, then they become a superhero anyway. In this movie, it's really, really different. They don't see this change as something positive. This is a forced alteration to their physiological states, and it's really fucking with them. Like Sue Storm, she doesn't want to be used as a weapon like Ben is. Ben is basically, if you took the Hulk and you put him under the control of the United States government. Like, they're sending him on missions to Iran. They're using him to fuck shit up, to do missions that regular soldiers can't do, and they're basically using him as a tool, which again feeds into the theme of the older generation abusing what scientists, what these young aspiring people are creating and building for their own purposes, which are more often than not going to be more detrimental to society in the long run then they're going to be potentially useful in the short run. And then you have Reed Richards, who wants to fix his friends because he feels like this is awful, because he kind of got the idea to just go ahead and go to the other dimension without proper clearance and that kind of stuff. And really the whole film manages to remain really hopeful from the protagonist's sides. Like I said, when they feel sad or a bit cynical, it makes sense. When they're angry, it makes sense. But also, there's a lot of great interactions between the characters themselves, particularly Reed Richards and Ben Grimm. Ben Grimm is my favorite character in this movie. Their whole relationship is really good. Miles Teller and Jamie Bell really play off each other, both pre and post transformation. I think the Ben Grimm stuff is endlessly fascinating, because in this version, he's like this kid who was abused by his older brother, who constantly said it's clobbering time before he started beating the shit out of him, and he's not really the brightest tool in the shed. He's really unremarkable as a person, and the only thing that really gives him any kind of light in his life is his friendship with Reed Richards, who's like this talented kid who's underappreciated by society. Like, he's really, really smart, but his parents don't get him, his teachers don't get him. They constantly try to make him like this ordinary dude, but he doesn't want to do that, and he just basically he keeps going his way, and he basically gives flipping them off like, fuck you, I'm not just some stupid average Joe. Like, I am smart, and I'm going to use my God-given gift to improve society. And these guys really kind of complete each other, because Ben's like a little tougher. He knows his way around ordinary people, where Reed is a bit more socially awkward. And the whole relationship between those guys is fantastic. Ben Grimm, like I said, my favorite character. The whole stuff with his brother is great. The stuff with him being used as a weapon is great and disturbing, because he's like 18 or 19 years old, and they're sending him like missions to Iraq and stuff to kill terrorists, and that is really, really sad, especially because that's the only thing he has to live for after he becomes the Thing. Like, what is he going to do? Like, he could probably break out of the facility if he wanted to, but what's he going to do? He's a big rock monster, and no one's going to give him the light of day, and he's basically at home being used as a weapon. And I find that endlessly fascinating. And he probably has one of the best deliveries and during the final battle. Special effects wise, I think the film looks fantastic. It's not really that over the top when it comes to the special effects. In fact, there are actually very, very few action scenes throughout the whole movie. Like, a lot of the movie, I want to say like 80% of it is actually characters just interacting with one another, talking about the mission, talking about the implications of the mission. And I think that's really interesting. It's so cool to see a comic book movie that's not just explosion, 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 blow up city, explosion, 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 snarky, tongue-in-cheek, quip, explosion, explosion, explosion. It's really interesting to see a comic book movie that actually doesn't completely base itself around the action, but rather lets the characters have a lot of room to breathe, a lot of room to interact, and a lot of room to establish who they are and what their relationships are with the other characters. This doesn't work 100% though. Like, they make a reference to Johnny's engineering skills, which is how he gets onto the project, but you never really get to see that. And in one of the trailers, there actually is kind of a scene where him tinkering with his car where he's actually does show off his engineering skills, but that's not in the movie. So his inclusion kind of feels forced. Ben's exclusion is something I kind of mixed on because, like I said, this is an unremarkable guy. Like, he's not physically that powerful. He's not really that bright. He's pretty much the epitome of an average Joe who just happens to be the friend of a super genius, and he kind of gets caught up in all this shit. His exclusion makes sense on that level. But on another level, he really doesn't have a relationship with any of the other characters. Like, he doesn't really get a lot of time to spend with Sue or Johnny. And so that kind of makes some stuff near the end really not work for me personally. All the performances I think are great. Everybody, I see critics and other reviewers say like no one gives a shit what's going on about this movie, but I really can't say that. Like, when Miles Teller and Jamie Bell are shooting the shit, they feel like real friends. Like, when Johnny's being a cocky asshole, you can tell that he's really getting into it. Like Franklin Storm, like, he genuinely comes off as like this warm fatherly figure who legitimately wants what's best for the kids. Victor Von Doom, I love it. I love this guy. I love Toby Kebbell in this role. I think he has a lot of really good points, and I think my favorite part about him is that he kind of represents a youth who's broken by the cynical world. Like, he's the one who started this teleportation project while Reed was still tinkering around with it in his little garage in like the New York suburb or whatever. And this guy was like working for the government and stuff. He was like building all this cool shit, but the work with the government broke him. Like, he's this guy who doesn't trust the government. He's the guy who says that these guys are going to take what we have created, they're going to abuse it, they're going to run this second plan to the ground just like they ran ours to the ground, and we probably shouldn't be letting them get away with it. And his best line in the whole movie, I think, that really solidifies his character for me personally, is when he asks Johnny and Reed, while they're a little drunk, that you guys know who first landed on the moon, or who's the first guy who went into space. And he says, these were not the dreams of Neil Armstrong or the other guy. Like, these were not their lifelong dreams. They were just these guys who were trained to do that. The people who made the technology possible for them to even go to space, to go to the moon, to survive on the moon, and then come back to Earth, were scientists. Scientists whose lifelong dream was to send a man into space. These were the guys who were really passionate about the project. These were the guys who really gave a fuck about the project on a personal level, and history doesn't remember them. He says that they probably died alone, wifeless, childless, penniless, drunk in a bar, telling everybody, I was the guy who sent Neil fart straw spice, before he falls off the bar tab and just dies of his liver cancer from decades of alcohol abuse. Like, that was really, really cool. It makes sense. Unfortunately, we really don't get a lot of time to see Victor's motivation after he transforms into Doom. A lot of his stuff about his motivation, about his character, comes before his transformation. Like, Doom shows up 20 minutes before the end of the movie, and then that's the climax. And that's kind of like a problem this movie has overall, is that it's kind of like the Man of Steel thing, where they take the ending of the first act and they kind of smush it with the beginning of the third act, and it feels really, really weird. Joey also said that it's kind of similar to Iron Man 1. I don't agree, because Iron Man 1's last act bored me to fucking tears. Like, I've never, ever been able to make myself watch through the last act of Iron Man 1, besides the very, very end where he says, "I'm Iron Man." In this one, even though it was rushed, even though some stuff should have been elaborated upon further, I was still entertained. The fight itself was entertaining. I was invested in the bad guy from before. The bad guy wasn't just a copy of all the heroes like a lot of Marvel Studios bad guys are, and his motivation makes sense. Unfortunately, like Ultron, the way he goes about it is just basically blow the fuck out of everything, which is a shame. But at least with this guy, I feel like it makes more sense, because Ultron's whole motivation was it's all about evolution, but his whole end game doesn't really reflect that at all, as far as I'm concerned. Whereas this guy's whole destroy the Earth, rebuild it from scratch feels more natural, because he just wants the Earth gone. He doesn't want to have anything else evolve. He just wants everything here on our planet gone. And so I feel like, even though the way he goes about his plan is kind of generic, the portal in the sky, I feel it fits better here than it did with Ultron. Like I said, this is not a classically if you're someone who's going to go into this expecting a lot of explosions and shit, you're not going to like this. But if you're someone who can sit through, say, The Godfather, which is all people talking and interacting with one another, and then a couple of action scenes here and there, I think you're really going to like this movie. If you're someone, aka most of the people going to watch comic book movies now, where you're this impatient asshole who just needs bright colors, funny tongue-in-cheek quips, and stupid explosions and shit, you're really going to hate this movie. And that is unfortunately the vast majority of the people who go watch these. And that is a perfect segue to my short little rant. When the fuck did people become okay with being treated like fucking idiots when watching a movie? Michael Bay constantly gets shit for appealing to the lowest common denominator, and how his movies should bomb because they do precisely that. They treat the audience like fucking idiots. And now we have a whole shitload of blockbusters that treat people like fucking inbred morons who couldn't even count to 2 without a quantum supercomputer spending 10,000 years explaining them that 2 is 2. And I don't get it. I really don't get how this movie can have such bad reception. I really, really cannot understand how, in this day and age, a movie like this that's more dialogue-driven, that's more about the themes and ideas, can get blasted so viciously by people. It's really, really sad. I'm gonna sound like a Marvel hater here, but I blame the Avengers for this, because the Avengers is a stupid fucking movie that everybody loves, and now everybody's trying to make the fucking Avengers. Everybody is treating blockbusters as this stupid tongue-in-cheek, bright sunny cherry, colorful bullshit, and treating the audience like fucking morons. What happened? What happened to the people who were oh man, this is amazing, we can have a smart action movie when The Dark Knight came out? What the fuck happened to these people? Did they all just die out? Did they move away from the internet and get replaced by the younger generation of morons? What the fuck happened to people? What happened to you people? When did you become okay with wanting the same formulaic bullshit over and over again? And when did you become okay with being treated like a fucking idiot by movies? Isn't this why you hate Michael Bay? Isn't it? Yeah, it's really sad. It's a really sad situation with the way movie audiences are. It's really just unbearably annoying how they just want everything to be like the motherfucking Avengers. But anyway, Fantastic Four. It's a really solid movie. I personally had lots and lots of fun with it. Keep an open mind about it. Actually put an effort into going to go see this. Like, don't just go into this saying, oh man, this movie's going to suck, it's going to be boring, it's just going to be people talking about stuff. No. Actually be fair to the movie itself and give it a proper chance. Like, don't bitch about the comic book accuracy or faithfulness. Give the movie a chance and judge it on its own merits. If you still hate it after that, that's fine. But don't just hate it because it's not a formulaic piece of shit like everything post The Avengers.